Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Women in Leadership Talk podcast. We are super excited to have Dr. Avis Deweever with us today from Maryland, just outside of DC. And we have a lot to talk to you about today. So thank you for joining in. We know you have a choice as to what podcast you listen to, and we're super grateful that you choose Women in Leadership Talk. And our objective is to really bring great women to share their stories and perspectives on what's happening in the world. So, Dr. Avis, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Well, thrilled to have you. So let me give you a little background on Dr. Avis so you know who we're talking to and why we're talking to her today. So she's an entrepreneur and she focuses on helping Black women business owners how to scale their businesses. And she does that by developing high-ticket offers, implementing high-profile media and marketing methods, and really being able to close those sales. But she's also a frequent speaker on race, gender and the economy, poverty, inequality of educational and economic opportunity, and issues of privilege, power, and policy in the US. And that's what really intrigued me, Dr. Avis, for you and I to get into a conversation today.
Sure.
There's just so many things that are happening in our world that I felt like this was a great opportunity for us to sort of dig in and unpack, from your perspective, what you're seeing. And so maybe just share with us what's led you to have this passion for advocating and, really just focusing on where you are today.
Yeah, sure. So, a bit about my background. I have an earned Ph.D. in political science, and my specialty in that discipline is the intersection of race, class, gender, and the economy.
Nice.
And so I've spent many years in that space. In fact, before starting my business, I built a career in the think tank industry in Washington, D.C. A lot of people outside of the Beltway probably have no idea what I mean when I say the think tank industry. And and you don't worry about it. You shouldn't. You didn't skip that day at school, okay? But basically, it's a whole ecosystem of research institutions in Washington, D.C. And what we do is we provide research and data analysis to policymakers to help them have the information that they need in order to pass laws that we believe will help people or stop laws that we believe will hurt people. And that's really what I spent my career doing prior to starting my business. And even though what I do now might seem different, I see it as a continuation of that straight line. As I have from the time that I was a little kid, I've always had an interest in social justice issues. My parents were from the southern part of the state, grew up in the well, not the state of Maryland, but in Virginia, and also my father's from North Carolina. And so they grew up in the Jim Crow South, a very just ugly history in our nation's past. And
Yes.
so I have a strong understanding of their challenges and what they had to overcome in order to meet with success and to set me up to have success. And to me, one of the main issues that is related to that success is the ability to create your own level of economic power. And so that's one of the things that I work towards in terms of my research and advocacy. And it's certainly what I work for in terms of helping to empower Black women to build very successful businesses.
I love that. I love that. And so many things you just said there. So I'm from the South as well. Grew up in Virginia and moved to Tennessee. So we've got some common ground. I live in
Yeah.
Canada now, so I'm a little far removed. But what you just talked about with, building your own economic power, like that is so important on so many levels.
Yeah.
And so, maybe we'll kind of jump into that today. I think there's a definitely for women in particular, and you've niched even more when you're focused on Black women. I mean, we know that even when you're trying to get funding, women have a really difficult time. Black women have an even harder time in getting funding. So maybe let's talk about, if we think about gender and the economy, what are you seeing as the opportunities for women in general and specifically Black women?
Well, what's really interesting is that Black women understand that left to the natural course of events, we face in America very much what we see as a double wage gap. So many of us have heard this term wage gap before. And in
Mhm.
terms of how that data is calculated, it's typically calculated by looking at the median earnings of white males in the US and then juxtapositioning that between the median earnings of women across various different ethnicities and races and women overall. And so when we hear a specific number like, hey, women make 72 cents for every dollar that a man makes, what they're doing is they're comparing the combination of all women and the median income of all of those women to that which the median income of white males make. What we rarely hear is the disaggregation of that data on the gender side, right? And so when we look at where Black women are, we see that we face a double wage gap where we're not only making only about 62 cents to the dollar of what our white male counterparts make, we make typically only about 78 cents to what our white female counterparts make.
Mm.
So we're facing this double wage gap. And look at that against the other data that we see in terms of Black women being the most highly demographic group in the United States. We believe highly educated demographic group in the United States. We believe in getting education, a lot of education. And then in addition to that, you look at all sorts of data that's been done and research that's been done by McKinsey and Company and leanin.org and all of those different spaces where they've done a lot of surveying with women in the workplace. And what they found is that Black women continuously are the most ambitious demographic group, it seems, in the workplace. And so what we know is happening here is that oftentimes, despite our education, despite our ambition, something is going on in the workplace that not just puts a a glass ceiling on our possibilities. We think of it as more like a concrete ceiling. Have less access to sponsors and the type of mentorship that we need in order to ascend to our greatest ambitions in the workplace. I say all that to say, seeing this reality, Black women are leaving the workforce to start their own businesses. Right now, we are and have been for several years the most likely demographic group in America to start their own business. And I see Black women as understanding that if we are ever to be paid fairly, we have to have the power to ultimately write our own checks.
Yeah. Wow. You said a lot of things there. I just want to do a quick check-in because I think our system might have froze. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
Okay, I can hear
Unfortunately,
you too. Our visual has kind of frozen, so I just want to make sure. So audience, forgive us.
uh,
Yeah, so so what you were just saying about so many Black women in particular, but I would say it's the same for white women as well.
mhm,
So many, especially in that middle management levels, leaving because they're not
mhm.
seeing the opportunities. And that ties back into what you were saying earlier with, finding your own economic power, creating that own economic power.
Yeah.
Because if you can't get it, because we have systems and barriers in place from hierarchy or different things, like we have to be able to go out and create our own. And
Mhm.
so I love that you've transitioned, so you have the data, you have the facts, and how to help women start to navigate all of those barriers and challenges that are showing up, right? that
Yeah.
that people are saying, no, you can't do this, and you're saying, oh yeah, you can.
Oh, yeah, you can. Yeah, you
Yeah.
can. And not only can you can do it at a high level. I think one of the challenges that women face writ large and Black women especially face is this issue of imposter syndrome. And we
Hmm.
hear about that term a lot. It shows up in the workplace, but it also shows up in entrepreneurship when we don't want to charge what we're worth, right? When we want to come in with a little itty bitty little price because we think we just want to prove that we're great at what we do. And ultimately not understanding that oftentimes we're shooting ourselves in the foot by undercharging because people then begin to doubt our the quality of what they would receive. And so it's really about not only taking the actions that's necessary to remove yourself from what you believe to be an exploitative system, but it's also the power to believe in yourself enough to actually go big and bold in the entrepreneurship space such that you can create the type of lifestyle that you have worked so hard to achieve. You shouldn't to me, the biggest tragedy is when you do leave the workforce and you don't write yourself the check that you're supposed to get. Like when you have the power, use it.
Yes, 100%, 100%. And I want I want you to repeat what you just said there about when you go out on your own, if you are not charging what you're worth, you're actually doing a disservice to yourself, but also you're telling your clients that you're not worthy. And
Absolutely.
that is so important. And there's a lot of those, self-belief stories that we tell ourselves. And drives me crazy because we are worth it, right? Like to your point earlier when you were talking about we invest so much into our education, we invest so
Mm,
much into our experiences so that we can serve others and the world. And
yeah.
then we do a disservice to ourselves by not really stepping fully into that power.
Absolutely. We sure do. And it's sad because, we have to think uh, what we do is we're not only living up to our own dreams, which we definitely should 100,000%, right? But in addition to that, think about all of the trickle down effects with you not paying yourself appropriately, right?
Yeah,
If you're not paying yourself appropriately, by not charging appropriately and not learning how to market and sell such that you can close deals at that level, then what sort of limited opportunities are you then providing your children as a result of not being able to afford to give them every advantage that they can in the world, right? What sort of future are you setting up for yourself when you decide one day, hey, I want to be able to spend the rest of my golden years on a beach somewhere? Can you do that? And if you haven't been appropriately making sure that you are making enough revenue and charging enough and making enough income, like personal income from your business, then you don't want to set yourself up for a situation where you can never retire. So it's like, if you're going to work this hard, which we know entrepreneurs, we work hard, you deserve to get paid for it. And you have
absolutely.
to get out of your own way so that you can receive those big checks.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And so I'll share just a little bit of myself. So I worked in corporate for 30 years and then I decided to become an entrepreneur, go out and do my own thing, which I absolutely love. But to your point, what you just shared, Dr. Avis, like it took me a little bit to recognize the importance of paying myself
Mhm.
first and consistently because we think, okay, we have to do this, this, and this. And the power that comes with that, the abundance that comes with that of paying yourself, like it is a whole shift in how you show up in the world, right? Because
Yeah.
what I heard you saying there was you're also modeling, right? You're modeling scarcity, you're modeling all these things that your family, your friends, your clients all sense, feel without any word ever being said. And when you
Mhm.
make that shift, that's you stepping fully into who you are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's honoring you.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
there is
Love that.
not, and you need to do that every single day. You need to be the first person and the last person every day to honor you in every way, shape, and form.
Love that. Love that. So let's talk a little bit about how or what you see women can do to really embrace this rise in femininity. And it's not just women. I think there's a whole, shift happening universally where we've had this strong masculine dominance for so long,
Mhm.
and we're migrating more to the feminine. So tell me what your thoughts, what you're seeing, what you're feeling about that.
Yeah. Well, to me, it's really about leaning into intuition, leaning into being able to listen and, take a step back and listen and then respond. It's about, being strong, but having the type of strength where it's not a, bulldoze people over type of strength, but the strength where you assess the situation, you listen to other people and implications and their needs, and then you respond to that. And I really think that and take ownership of what needs to be done in order to address those needs. I believe that we have seen over the years that this sort of approach is very effective, right? It's very effective. It's universal. It's effective in every country. I haven't mentioned I have had the opportunity to, travel the world quite a bit and do and provide a great deal of trainings for women in various different nations. Unfortunately, I haven't been to Canada. It's really you're my neighbor.
Well,
I
you
should
have
have
to
come up
come
there.
visit.
Yeah, I've been on your CTV and those other places with my political analysis, but I have not visited there. But I will say that one of the things I can tell you just from the work that I've done in that space is that countries understand, particularly, you know, countries that are on the rise,
Mhm.
understand the importance of maximizing the women in their nations in terms of their human capital potential. And so they understand that that is a key for the entire nation to rise. And I believe that the more that, so quote unquote, Western countries can do in order to make sure that every sort of not only barrier is removed for women to be able to be the most that they can be, but also that we sort of honor the way in which our leadership looks. Our leadership might look a little different from a man at the helm. Different does not mean worse. Oftentimes, different means better. I think there's something
Yes.
that oftentimes we can learn from a feminine approach to leadership
Yeah.
that I believe would help the world not only have better outcomes, but quite frankly, be able to get along a whole lot better too.
Yeah, I so agree with you. And I mean, I think we're at that peak right now where, there's so much unease and unsettled in the world, not,
Mhm.
not just North America and Western world, but in the world.
Mhm.
And that feminine uh, attributes can really help to start to ease some of that. And
Mhm.
that's scary too, because masculine has always been in the power position. And
Mhm.
so there's a lot of people wanting to hold on to the power. And
Yes.
it's how do we neutralize and equalize and harmonize more of that balance between the feminine and the masculine? I think that's really where we are in the world, right?
Mhm.
And the feminine, we have to do our part as women to really own that, right? And tell that imposter syndrome voice that pops up that I got this. It's okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We
Beautiful.
have to. Mhm.
So what do you see when you think about individuals and their contributions to have an impact on power and policy issues? Like this has come up a lot lately with, different guests that I've talked to. Just sometimes we take a back seat. So
Mhm.
what can we be doing to influence the policies that are actually being made right now?
Yeah, this is very important. I think oftentimes people have a very limited view of civic engagement.
Mm,
They think that voting is their only responsibility in a democracy. And I
mm,
say that voting is the beginning of your responsibility in a democracy and not the end. And so, what that looks like is, yes, of course, making your voice heard in terms of elections, but also it means holding those lawmakers accountable once you voted for them, or holding people accountable that you didn't vote for that won anyway. Okay. And
yes.
so, yeah. So, I mean, either way, you need to stay engaged. And that looks like keeping up with what's happening in terms of their legislation that you are interested in and that you want to be passed or stopped. That means engaging with your representatives. Like I said, whether or not you voted for you, if they represent you, you have a voice and you need to make sure they hear from you. That can look like emails, that can look like written letters, that can look like literally going to their offices, either their local offices or their offices either in Parliament or in Congress in the United States. And so it means making your voice heard because as someone who has not only worked in the policy space in the think tank spaces I've mentioned, I've also worked with elected officials as staffers and led political campaigns. So I have a long background in this space. What I can tell you about people who hold elected office is they understand that when they hear from one person, that one person likely represents a good 25, 50 other people at least. Okay.
Yeah.
And so they pay close attention to constituents. So my hope for you is that you understand that you still have power beyond the voting booth and to exercise that power. Obviously, there are other ways that you can make your voices heard. You can participate in protest, you can boycott. There are tons of ways that you can take action. My goal, though, is to make sure that you do that. Just take action in whatever way you choose, in as many ways that you choose, because at the end of the day, it's your responsibility to create the reality that you want to see in the space that you live.
I love that. That I think that's such an important message because so often we do get to that place where somebody's in office and we voted and we just go, "Ugh, you know what, there's nothing I can do."
Mhm.
There is a lot of power in your voice, and there's a lot of power in the consistency of your voice. That
Yep,
doesn't mean you have to get louder. It doesn't mean you have to get angry, but expressing and advocating for the changes that need to take place are really important. And
absolutely.
yeah, so I love what you've said there, and you've given some great examples of how to do that, right? It doesn't like you don't have to protest. You can email, you can write letters, you can call, you can like, and if they're non-responsive, keep calling,
Yeah.
keep writing, right?
Right.
Somebody, and I'll just use that in Canada as an example. Some things that were going on. I started sending letters to my local person, and he was great. He's in our Senate, and he was like, "Oh, you need to do your really local person."
Mhm.
And he was responsive. She was not responsive, which was
Mhm.
really interesting,
That's
right? But I
smart.
just
Yeah.
kept sending it and I copied both, right? Because, again, it's to your point, when they hear it enough, they go, okay, this is clearly an issue. Yeah.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you can influence. We have to understand that change oftentimes is not overnight, but change happens. And the opportunities that I have been afforded as compared to the opportunities that my parents were afforded is an example of that. And that change did not happen because people did nothing. That change happened because people found all the different levers that they could push, even when many of them could not vote without risking their lives. There were, they did participate in protest and had all sorts of different levers that they pushed in order to create change. And I believe that um, it is still your responsibility to make your voice heard in multiple ways and in whichever way you feel comfortable in order to create the world that you want. Are
Yeah.
we at a place now where I feel like, okay, we've arrived? No, and we won't get there in my lifetime. But my children will carry the torch. Their children will carry the torch, and that's how change happens.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And to your point, like it's the legacy, right? Like what foundation are you laying for the next generation? And will it be a better place than what it is today, right? And so our
Mhm.
hopes is the things that we are doing will have significant impact, that will support those who will continue to carry that torch.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Wow, love that. So we know that our voices have to be amplified even more. And as women, maybe we just talk about from a gender perspective,
Hmm.
we know from Lean In, McKinsey and Grave, like all the different surveys and research that's been done, we're 130 years at least away
Yeah.
from, having any kind of equality.
Hmm.
So, what are some things that you think that women can do today that will start to bridge that gap more?
Well, I'm going to say I could talk about being active in politics. I can talk about running for office, which I do believe more women need to run for office and hold
Mhm.
office. Make sure that we are supporting those candidates and donating to women who are running for office. All of that is true, and that needs to happen now. But I also want to say that if you have children or you are in the lives of children, how you raise, especially your sons, matter. I'm the mother of two sons, and I've been very intentional about making sure that my sons understand issues from a variety of perspectives, and they understand the impacts of justice and the lack thereof as it relates to race issues, as it relates to gender issues, as it relates to all of those different social stratifications that we see. And because of that, I know that as they grow up and they ascend into positions of power, they're not going to have the same attitudes that maybe someone a couple of generations above them would have when they are encountering women in the workplace. They're going to be the type of people that open doors. They're going to be the type of people that advocate for. They're going to be the type of people that look at that woman in the office, that new hire, as someone that has just as much capability and authority and power in her leadership and respect as they would give any man. And so, obviously, there are things that we can do, as I mentioned, get more women elected to office is definitely one of them. But I also say, let's not feed patriarchy by birthing new people that uplift patriarchy. How
Yes.
about we birth people
I love it.
that will fight for equality for
Yeah,
all? And that's a part of the responsibility of mothering in my mind.
I agree, 100%. I used to, because I have one of each, and so as my kids have been growing up, I have often said, I've asked those questions like, what do you see when you think about your sister or your friends or whatever? Like, are they, equal to you? And he's like, what are you talking about? They're way smarter than I. But it's interesting to your point, right? Like, because it is how we raise them and
Mhm.
getting them to recognize that, they are smart and not using that as a leverage to
Yeah.
get the women to do the work for them.
Yeah.
Because that's the other piece I think that oftentimes what happens is we're problem solvers.
Yes.
We want to, men want to be in power. Women want to ensure that we're addressing those social issues, right? We
Mhm.
want to make
Mhm.
changes better for the world.
Mhm.
And so we often will not put our hand up to do the political, front runner because we'll be supporting the guy who's doing it. And so that's a big shift we also need to see. Uh,
Absolutely.
yeah.
It is. And we have actually we've done some research on that in the past, and it's interesting because most women who run for office have to be asked, or suggested. It needs to be suggested to them like over a dozen times. It's like an insane number. I don't want to pull one out the air, but it's a lot of times. Like women have to be asked over and over again. Hey, you should run for office before it sticks. And they think, oh yeah, maybe I should run for office. Whereas men are more likely to see that as something that they, of course, should do. And so, just one small thing that we could do is if you don't feel like you see it within your desire to run for office, who do you know that should? And let
Yeah.
her know. Okay, just let her know, because once she hears that, you may have planted a seed um, that could end up with that person taking a position of power like that, that could have an enormous amount of positive effects for the rest of society.
Yeah. No, I love that. And that goes back to the comment you made earlier about the allyship and the sponsorship, right?
Mhm.
Like it's that plant that seed, right? And then
Yep.
nurture it, help it grow because let's just face it, our world is not going in the right direction at the moment. And we
No,
need we need a course correction. And
absolutely.
yeah. So, Dr. Avis, I mean, clearly you and I could spend hours on this topic. Both of us very passionate about not just women, but the shift that needs to happen in the world. Um,
Absolutely.
what would be maybe one or two things that you want to leave our audience with today that maybe we haven't talked about yet, but that you feel are really important um, fiduciary and socially responsible things that we need to do as good citizens?
Mhm. I think as good citizens, we need to understand that right now, as you mentioned, is a very disturbing time for a lot of people. And now is a moment in which it's important that we listen and that we hold space for people to express their sorrow, and that we protect people who are vulnerable to other people's attacks. I think that's a very, very important thing to do, even when it's not popular, even when everyone else is saying that you're wrong by doing that. I think right now is a moment where we have to stand up for what's right, and that's critically important. It just hurts me to see everything that's happening right now in the world, and now's the time to be brave enough to say it needs to stop. Right. I think also it's a moment for us to think about abundance in a broad way, just
Mhm.
specifically as entrepreneurs. One of the areas that I'm spending a lot of time on this year specifically is not only helping women to build very successful businesses, but have them think about abundance holistically. Like, how
Mhm.
are they making sure that their lives are the way that would allow them to live lives that would be, fulfilling, reflective of good health, emotionally and physically. Allow them the space of joy, right? And have that be a sustained experience because they deserve it. So for me, a mantra that I have right now is really about living a life of holistic abundance. I think that that's possible. And I think that's something that we need to embrace in this new year.
Love that. And what a great way, right? Like we're early part of the new year. And so what a great way to, really be intentional about how you bring those things into your life and knowing you deserve it. You're not
Absolutely.
taking away from somebody else. You absolutely deserve
Absolutely.
it. So,
Absolutely.
Dr. Avis, where can people find you? Like, how could they reach out or, curious to learn more? Where would they
Absolutely.
find you?
Well, related to this focus on holistic abundance, I do have an free ebook and audiobook that describes my thoughts on that I think would be very helpful for individuals who are wanting to sort of make sure that their lives right now are more holistically sound and abundant. And they can
Mhm.
find that at abundanceredefined.com. That's abundanceredefined.com. And from there, I can definitely stay in touch with you.
Love it. Love it. Love it. And thank you for offering the free ebook.
Sure.
This gives our audience an opportunity to go in and, explore, just where they are and how abundant are they living at the moment?
Yes.
And looking at your life holistically. And oftentimes, especially, I think, I'm speaking for myself here as a woman, we oftentimes will think about our family, our careers first, and we forget about ourselves. And
Yeah.
it's that old, saying about the oxygen mask has to go on you first in order for you to be able to help others.
Mhm.
So perfect timing. Perfect timing.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Thank
Well, it's
you.
a pleasure to have you on here today, and thank you for being a guest with the Women in Leadership Talk podcast. This has been really informative, and thank you for the work you're doing. Like you're really pulling together the data, the research, and how to actually incorporate that into action, which I love. So thank
Thank
you for
you so
that.
much. It's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Awesome. And I want to thank our audience. Thank you so much for being here today at the Women in Leadership Talk podcast. And if you're curious about your leadership and how you're showing up in the world, you can go to WIL Empowered, that's 1L, and take our free leadership quiz. It'll give you some insight as to how you're showing up. Again, that's wilempowered.com with 1L. So we look forward to hosting you again on the Women in Leadership Talk podcast. So everyone take care, and we will see you in the near future. Bye for now.